Reform and Legislative Modernization, no, Rules Review and Legislation Modernization Committee to order, 6:30. It's January 31st. We are rescheduled from last week. Welcome. I'd like to ask Brandon to call the roll.
Sure thing, Madam Chair. Ms. Lakakis.
Here.
Mr. Grimm.
Here.
Mr. Joyce.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Present.
Mr. Purley.
Here.
Mr. Ricard.
Present.
Ms. Willingham, Mr. O'Brien, and Mr. Kuhn are all excused. 6 present.
6 present. Excellent. So at first, we'll need a motion to approve the meeting minutes from last month.
Motion.
Mr. Ricard, second by Mr. Miller. All in favor? Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is local law O for 2022, a local law of the County of Albany, New York, adopting the code of Albany County, New York. Mr. Joyce is here to share some information.
Well, it just passed out of law this evening. A lot of work went into this. Again, I want to take this opportunity to thank our Legislative Council and the Clerk's Office for all the work that they have done over the years to get us to this point. Once local law O is adopted, we're going to work with IT and all of our departments to make sure that it's uploaded onto the website and updated in a timely manner for the people of Albany County to review at their leisure.
I did have a question, if I may. So is that going to be the chair's office that ferrets the information to the clerk, or are you going to put it right up yourselves, or how is, or the majority?
Do you mean updating it?
Yeah,
Or,
like as it happens. I know Mr. Bergdorf was asking half an hour ago, but I was more curious about who's doing it.
it goes from the majority's office to the clerk to the relevant department, so I would assume that we now have the clerk of the county as a relevant department, and then the vendor E-code would receive it there.
Take it from there.
If that's too many people in the room,
That's very simple.
she can handle it.
That ought to work just fine.
So they'll have E-code actually puts it on there, does it?
Well, it has to get to E-code.
Okay.
Excellent. It's going to be fantastic. Anybody have any questions?
I do,
Mr. Grimm?
Madam Chair. One thing I'm very interested in is the searchability, because
Robust.
these documents aren't really useful unless the average person, this is open to all the citizens? This
Yes.
code will be posted somewhere?
Yes,
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
it-
That
it'll
they
be-
can find easily?
yeah, it's gonna be
Under-
right on our website. It's ultimately a separate website, but it'll be tied to ours.
And people can access information on their own, they don't have to ask for any FOIL or anything like that?
No,
Okay, and the searchability, if they type in something,
very
a
good.
citizen would type in, they would be able to find it?
Yes, almost down to the letters.
Okay, that's great then, thanks.
And that's just the laws, right? The local laws and all the resolutions that we pass and
Not all the
not all the
resolutions,
resolutions?
the ones that are outward facing. You buy a snowplow, that's not it.
Okay.
It's the ones that affect the general public. Look at it more of as our constitution than the stuff that we did earlier today in the other meetings.
Isn't the charter a constitution?
Yeah, I'm just, it's granted more than, it is of course amendable, but it's our administrative code that's the easiest way.
Is there anything that would surprise us that you guys changed? Because you guys had to go through all
No,
this,
when you go
which is
through-
amazing work. I mean, you have to speak to what the chairman was saying. But how would we know what's been changed, other than reading the whole?
It's in the agenda.
It's in
Yes.
Right here.
Yeah,
There's a list of stuff, but
Yeah,
it
that's
doesn't
what it is.
really tell me what exactly does it mean.
So administratively, our office worked with, obviously, counsel from the chair's office, Arnis from the minority office. There were things that we were able to administratively change as we presenting this to you that would line up with language that's more consistent with state law, changes of that nature. There's different times where, over the course of the 50 or 60 or 70 years that the names of departments have changed, or new departments have been created. That type of language of stuff we were able to make consistent throughout the code. So that was things that we were able to change administratively when we presented this to you. There are other issues that will remain to be addressed by the legislature that are more issues of policy that we don't have the ability to administratively change. And as we go forward, one of the parts of this process will be for either, the relevant committees to meet and have those discussions about ways to amend the code to address those policy issues. But this will set the entire framework of the code online. It'll make everything searchable. This is the lion's share of the work that's needed to be done to actually have this be online.
Okay, That's great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do you have any more questions? Would anyone like to make a motion? Mr. Grimm? Mr. Miller, you seconded?
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes favorably. Congratulations, Mr. Chair. Next, let's go to current business. It is a discussion regarding implementation of Granicus programs for Albany County. Mr. Joyce?
Thank you, Lynn. Just to kind of guide our discussion, I wanted to ask if it's okay with you, ask Patrick to kind of give us a kind of a review of where we're at with Granicus right now and some recommendations for how this committee can potentially formally get with the vendor and reenact some movement on their end. So, Mr. Collins, if you would, just kind of give us an
Right.
update of where we are and some recommendations for how we can move forward.
So, Granicus is a software suite. It's not just a single part, and it's ultimately 3 separate pieces of software, and then some hardware. I see Mr. Grimm is using it right now. You all have it on your tablets. That's one part of it. There's the entire network or server that is distributing that information. That's where the majority's office and the executive departments funnel the information back and forth. Ultimately comes down to an agenda, it's adopted, it comes out of Granicus, it goes on the website. Then there's another part, I know we just talked about the E-code as a website, but there's also a part that is will become a public-facing website. That's all the resolutions as opposed to the more public-facing local laws that are in the code. So it includes minutes, it includes the calendars, it includes the votes, it includes the legislative text and any backup. This isn't the best agenda to demonstrate it with, but our standard agendas are many pages long. They're much more accessible on the tablets or on that website. It's attachments on the website. So this predates me, this entire suite. I think that poster predates me. But we started working on going from the old paper to the software suite before I started, but definitely we're doing it. And we were gearing up to get towards a first finish line when COVID hit. You recall going into the chambers and getting trained. Like COVID completely stopped that. In the background, the majority's office and the executive branch have been pumping everything into Granicus. That never changed. But we need to clean it up to make it public facing. Because at the dawn of it, starting in 2018, definitely in 19, but pretty much stopped in 20 because we were gearing up to go live, we stopped putting test files in there because we didn't need to tinker anymore. We understood the product. And what we have to do now is get rid of all the clutter that was there back in 18, 19. So we've been talking to the executive branch about what do they need out of that? Because when they submit an RLA to buy a snowplow, once it goes into Granicus, at a certain point it now becomes legislative documents. And it stays legislative documents until it comes out of Granicus if we adopt it, or I guess if it fails. So they lose access to anything that goes in there. We're going to try and archive everything, so if they need prior resolutions, prior backup really, that they'll be able to access that. If we achieve that, which this is weeks, not months, to determine whether or not we're going to be able to archive it. If we're capable of archiving it, we'll start to be able to answer the question of when do we go live with the public-facing website. You guys are all live on your tablets. So if we know that there's no clutter from the testing that we did early on in 18 and 19, we could pick a date that is the start of Granicus on the public side. The implementation of the software suite in chambers is a little bit different. We again tried to do that at the beginning of 2020, but COVID hit and we put the brakes on it. And we didn't get back into chambers until earlier this year, or earlier last year. That's going to be multi-steps. Looking back at everything, we were going to do it in multi-steps back in 2020, but we're just revisiting that timeline. We're going to have to make this, well, you all are going to have to make decisions in the legislature as a whole to amend the rules to make them consistent with the way we will come to operate in chambers. Not a heavy lift, not impossible, but you should make the rules consistent with the actual conduct. Then there'll have to be questions answered, and I brought this up when we started doing, if you can recall, when we started voting on the tablets, it was the traffic light, red no, green yes, yellow abstain. When do you want to use that? If you do it every vote, you're really going to slow down the process. These are just things that'll have to be determined as you get re-familiar with what I showed you, or what staff showed you 3 years ago. So there's been some issues with the vendor. They're not dire. There's been staff turnover or staff promotions there, where getting things modified or getting answers was not the quickest thing in the world. But it seems like we're in a good place right now. But we can't take our foot off the gas. So we'll just continue to have meetings with the executives, staff, and with IT about, let's make sure that when we pull the cord and get rid of all the old, that only the old left, and that no one lost anything. And then we'll just designate a date, that is the start of Granicus. Again, it already started, it's just in the background. That'll be the start of the public facing. All the old will remain on the website as it does, it'll be archived. And we'll just cruise along.
Are there any other requirements for money, costs? Is the software that we have adequate to do all of that still, or do we need to add an additional package? There were 3 or 4 more packages we could get to dance and sing.
Not that I'm aware of.
Good.
I think that the modifications we asked for were within our contract.
That's how it sounds to those of us who were there at the time. Anybody else have a question?
I did.
Mr. Miller?
So for some of us that came in 2020, right, when this was all ending, and you were trying to get it started up, when you talk about its use in chambers, what kind of applications are we talking about?
So your devices have the agendas on them, and they're very robust in terms of everything's there. It's at your fingertips. You want the legislative text, click on the word legislative text, it pops up. You want the backup, it's all there. Because the backups can be multiple documents and multiple page documents. So that, I think, again, I wasn't here when it was purchased, but I think that was one of the biggest parts, because our agendas used to be phone books. So that was one of the big parts. The second part is to allow the voting to occur from the device. But, and I'll give better examples, and we'll probably do some training with all the membership in chambers, but to do the electronic voting on every single vote will slow the process dramatically. The chairman can call the vote, all those in favor, opposed, far quicker than us publishing it to the tablets, which is multiple button pressing, assuming everyone has their devices, assuming everyone votes properly. Even explaining, I'm already past the amount of
Is
time.
it more
it
like
takes
roll
to-
call kind of things and more for that?
For long
kind of-
roll calls, that
better.
would be where it shines,
Gotcha.
because it's instantly
All right.
processed.
So we already have the biggest part of it, which is our access to the agendas in the
In my
chamber.
mind,
Yeah.
I know some people really like electronic voting.
That's
What
the big
you
part.
hold in front of you is the biggest part.
Okay, thank you.
You know, we did practice a kind of an in-between where we would do the all-in-favor thing, and then that one day when we did vote for a minute, when we needed a long roll call, we could vote electronically, and then when we didn't, it was just assumed.
Yeah,
But
I just
that-
saw,
We had to make rules to allow for that, right?
yeah, I would just say update the rules to be consistent. We're not the only ones using Granicus, the executive branch has been using it. So that may have been part of the reason why we went to it, but it's a unified system between the executive branch departments and the legislative branch. It will get the DA and the sheriff on board eventually. So it makes it a little bit more efficient doing that.
Thank you.
But isn't that, what we do right now is, if Andrew asks for a roll call, or a vote, everyone says yes, you keep moving. If there's no's, Andrew, you usually call for a roll call on those, on that occasion, don't you?
Right,
Just out of courtesy, really, I
Yeah.
think is why you do it.
yeah.
But that would be the same way that we could blow through an agenda. Most of our votes are all yeses anyway.
Right.
But if there's a no, then you could go to the electronic.
Right, and that's my main concern with this suite is that, you know, our votes are accessible to the public in real time. So I understand it's onerous, but we could work with a vendor or come up with a solution, better training, but that was one of the key attractive points of this software suite is that if somebody wanted to know how we voted, you know, the morning after, they would know immediately or that evening.
No. The 11 o'clock news, they have no way of knowing how people voted. And the next day they don't know. The morning news is doing the 11 o'clock news.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Just to clarify with the voting, so the VoteCast software, which is what the members will be using on their tablets in chambers, that's correct about the way that you will have to use the tablets to vote yourselves. There is an option that the clerk will have on her laptop, which is in many ways like a manual option to say, because when it's the same platform that she uses to call the vote and say, okay, this is going to be a vote on item number 8. And then she'll say long roll call, it'll push it to your devices, and that's when you'll have the ability to do the long roll calls votes. But she'll also have an ability, there's an option there on her side that she'll be able to say, you know, unanimous or all in favor, or it's one of the, I think there's another option, I forget what it is right now, I haven't seen the screen in quite some time. But some of that should make this process a little bit faster as the chairman, you know, calls out the vote, and if there's all in favor and it's unanimous, Nicole should be able to just hit that item and move on to the next one. Exactly, we haven't had much time to really try that out in theory to see how fast it'll work, if it's gonna be quicker or slower than just calling the vote verbally. The one advantage to it from a records keeping point of view is that when the when the VoteCast system and she is completed, when the meeting is done and she hits end meeting, the record will be available. So there's another finalizing process that she'll have to do, and we can work out the best way to do that, what's the most timely, but that record itself will be able to then go right to the website. So if we were to do it, and you know, if we were to try to do it manually and try to enter them in at a later point, the morning after, et cetera, that might be a little bit slower to getting items on the website. But it really depends on the speed in which the members would like to have the meeting completed. So that may add an extra amount of time to how quickly she can put them in the program, you know, or it may be, you know, it may be too long or maybe long enough that you guys would tolerate that, but that's something we'll have to see as we get closer to it.
For example, one of the things I see is a lot of people come and speak out, and they're really emotional about it. But they don't really, it's hard for them to know what the voting is because it goes kind of quickly. How soon would they have access to how people actually voted on the thing that they cared about most? I mean, could they go on their smartphone and say, geez, let me check?
It's not that live. I would not expect.
I mean, how long though would it be?
There's some amount of time. It wouldn't be instantaneous. It just, there may be a few steps between when Nicole closes out the meeting as clerk and when it's posted to the website. We'll have to, you know, we'd have to do a little bit more digging to kind of refamiliarize ourselves with how long that process takes. I know there's a bit of a process. It's not supposed to take terribly long, but I'm not sure if we're talking minutes or, you know, an hour or two, just because we haven't done it in quite some time.
From a reporter standpoint, I would cover something and have to go back and edit. And I don't know, you know, what the final vote was. Or somebody was supposed to call me and they wouldn't call me. You know, and sometimes they call it the wrong vote. You know, they have, in a reasonable amount of time, both media and citizens have access to it. That's a tremendous government asset.
I don't know about the experience of the rest of you, but constituents continue to ask me when we're gonna be able to follow people's voting records. And this, when it gets up on the website, will be the way. They ought to be able to go to Grimm and click on Grimm, and it'll say he voted this way, and that way. He's on these 10 committees. You know, he carried this legislation last month and 2 years ago and whatever. But,
So
it's like a big airball. It's supposed to. So whenever, but the question is, sounds like the question between being live and being a record, there might be some. But even so, when it becomes a record, it should be a record and it should be easy to access by everybody. That's the point of it. Anybody else? Mr. Bergdorf?
Yeah, I just, following is sort of obviously agree with everything. Couple of functionalities I would love to be able to see. Many times, including this last meeting, the chairman was able to group 10 things together that were similar. I would hope that somehow you could build into the Granicus the ability to continue grouping things if it made sense, because it could cut a 80-item agenda down to a 30-item agenda, if it made sense. I don't know if that's possible or not.
It is possible, and it's one of the aspects I was thinking about when I said we should update the rules to be consistent with the way we roll this out.
And another aside, that we have one more minute here. I would like it if we could use the screen more, because there's still the people in the back, Carol and her cohorts, they can't really see what we're doing still, so I think with Granicus was live, you would see the resolution up there on the screen,
Yeah.
and then later you might be able to see our vote if it's unanimous, but at least they know what we're voting on. It's quite miserable to sit back there without any paper and not really know what's going on, when you're waiting, especially when you're waiting for something, it's number 19, and, you don't know where we are or whatever. Mr. Bergman?
Second point I wanted to make was having to do with when somebody amends a local law. I mean, theoretically, when you publish it, it's that version that we vote on, right? Can that be automatically updated into Granicus so that we can always see the last version of a piece of legislation? Because sometimes we don't see it until the day before or whatever. I don't know if that's a lack of internal process or you never say, somebody says, well, I'm gonna fix this before we publish, but you never quite know what's been fixed and how it's been resolved.
I will make a note of that. Javon, did you have your hand up, or were you just?
No.
No, okay. Anybody else have anything else?
Just one other, clarification. I'm glad to hear that Granicus is, that the vendor is back up and responsive and helping out. That was my initial concern, was getting good communication back and forth with the vendor to ensure that we were getting what we paid for. So hopefully staff can continue to keep us updated as things progress, and if there's something this committee needs to do or the legislature needs to do to put something in writing in terms of a timeline, to keep everything flowing in the right direction. Certainly update us and guide us along in the process and as that progresses.
Sounds good.
I can speak to that if you don't mind.
Cool.
To the chairman's point about updates from Granicus, especially on their staff. So one of the things, the Granicus is the contract with the company that we have, and we have 3 different suites of software that are used on the tablets. We have the Vocast, we have Legistar, which is the administrative stuff that's used by the executive office, our office, the chairman's office. And then there's iLegislate, which is what's on your tablets. The way that Granicus has previously been structured is that they had a contact person for each software suite to make sure that if you had a question, that you'd be able to say, okay, well, this is on Vocast, so you have to call this person or that person. So it ends up being a lot of issues where, we'll reach out with a couple different questions that are on different suites, and now there's a lot of trying to loop in different people, and it just was very cumbersome. What Granicus has done now is they've restructured how they handle their concerns as far as customer service and responsiveness. They now have one person who is responsible for Albany County's contract. So that person, it is up to them to now chase down the answers for the extra suites that we have and be responsive to us. The person who has just come on in this role is has been very responsive and very, outgoing as far as reaching out to us and figuring out where they are in the contract and what are the issues that we need. They see that we've had a longer duration for our contract as far as getting things all in place than most, so they want to help essentially, get us up and running and fully online. So that's where we are currently. We've talked to IT, John Wemple, myself, and some other people. We're trying to set up a meeting in the next few weeks to actually close the loop on that, to get the issues resolved as far as all the extra documents that Pat had mentioned and any other issues that we have that are in the way of us getting this online. So that is where we currently stand with the vendor.
To, if I could, just to follow up, what Brandon said is spot on, but the resolution he's talking about, or what will be resolved at the end there is the public-facing website, how the members voted, the minutes, all that stuff. I think we go for that first. Clean up the old stuff, get it public-facing. You already have the tablets, so on your end, that step is done. The in-chambers step would be the last in my mind, because it's gonna take a little bit more time, because we have to retrain ourselves to use it. If a motion is made, it's recorded as Mr. Bergdorf made a motion, it was seconded by Mr. Grimm, and here was the motion, so it's an active process, whereas here, Brandon writes it down, then records it later. It's a little bit more active, the staff is gonna have to get themselves retrained, but I think the focus right now should be getting that website public facing, which to me, it doesn't seem like a huge lift, but I can't promise anything.
Patrick or Landon, you know why we still have these paper agendas that Lynn and I haven't used in 4 years? Is it just member resistance?
It's not member resistance. We have these agendas out of abundance of caution in case a member comes in and forgets their tablets are dead, something happens, a malfunction, maybe a password update. There's various issues that can come up that would put a barrier between the members and their tablets. So we always make it a point to make sure that we have some paper available, just to make sure that every member has the opportunity to, see and meaningfully, participate in the committee meetings without having to maybe look over other people's shoulders. That another member may have notes or, private things on that they have kept on their documents that maybe they don't want to be, sharing with other members. So that's, and also for the main legislative committee, for the main legislative meetings, we have them available for the public as well. Because if anyone from the public, doesn't have access or hasn't looked at stuff online and wants to walk in and see the actual verbiage, we always have copies of the agendas and some of the backup. Granted, not everything, because as Pat has mentioned, some of them can be quite large, but we always have things available for, the public, members themselves, maybe press, whoever would need it. So it's kind of an issue now, if, there's always a goal to get to, as few amounts of packets of paper as possible. We may always have some paper just in case we have those issues with
But I just,
tablets.
the agendas are online.
Correct.
I want to get people to use the smartphone of the public, or the media be online, for agendas. We just want to remove away from paper, and I see there's some resistance, frankly. It's a little frustrating.
I do appreciate it. Did we have didn't we buy 2 extra ones, 2 extra pads? Like, should we make a point of, in addition to having the pile of paper, that we might have the juiced up pad all ready to go,
So
at every committee meeting?
you're correct, we bought 2. One ended up being a replacement for one that was
Dead.
it's no longer in service. And Brandon uses the other one to, when he publishes it, he's got to check that it exists. So that it looks on his like it looks on yours.
All right, well, if that's, maybe we need to budget for another couple ones, and we could just focus on bringing one of those around. This way, we will be more supportive of the idea of not carrying the paper. All right, I'm feeling good about this. If you're done, I take a motion to close. Thank you, Mr. Joyce. Mr. Grimm, second. All in favor? Thank you. Come again.
What's that?
They were
You
sitting there
want
when I
to